"We have more important things to do, Mom." Those were the words my son, Ethan, texted me on the day of my 65th birthday. I was sitting at my dining room table, surrounded by gold balloons and a chocolate cake I had baked with my own 2 hands. Just like every year for the past 15 years, ever since his father died. 51 missed calls. That's what I found on my phone the next morning. 51 times they tried to reach me after I sold the house I had bought for them without telling them a thing. But that morning, as I counted each missed call with the same coldness I'd felt signing the sale papers, I remembered exactly how all of this had started. It was a Tuesday in October when I decided to plan my birthday dinner. I'd been getting ready for weeks, buying the ingredients for Ethan's favorite cake, the same kind he'd loved since he was a little boy. I had even sent out my mother's old dining room table to be refinished. The house smelled of cinnamon and vanilla when the baking was done. I'd laid out embroidered tablecloths, linen napkins I saved for special occasions, and even cut flowers from the garden for a centerpiece. Everything was perfect, just as I always tried to make it when my family came to visit. By 6 o'clock in the evening, the table was set for 4. Ethan, his wife Jessica, my granddaughter Maya, and me. I had spent the entire afternoon cooking: herb roasted chicken, creamy mashed potatoes, a fresh salad, and those dinner rolls that Jessica loved so much. The golden afternoon light streamed through the dining room windows, creating that warm atmosphere that always made me feel like all was right with the world. I lit the candles, put on some soft music, and sat down to wait. 6:30. 7:30. The chicken was getting cold. The candles had burned halfway down, and I was still sitting in my chair, wearing the blue dress I'd bought especially for the occasion, looking toward the door every time I heard a car on the street. At 8, I decided to call. The phone rang 5 times before Ethan answered, his voice distracted, as if he were multitasking while talking to me. "Mom, I'm so sorry, but we're not going to be able to make it. Something came up with Jessica's work, and Maya has a big school project due tomorrow." His voice was flat, emotionless, as if he were canceling a dentist appointment. "Not my birthday celebration. We'll celebrate some other day, yeah?" Before I could even respond, he had hung up. I sat in silence for a long time, the phone still in my hand, staring at the perfectly set table that suddenly looked like an empty theater stage after all the actors have gone home. The candles were still burning, the food was still warm, but the house was filled with a silence that hurt more than any shout. That's when the text message arrived. "We have more important things to do, Mom." Not even a proper apology, not a belated happy birthday, just that one cold sentence that stabbed me in the chest like a knife. That night, as I packed the food into plastic containers and blew out the melted candles, I didn't cry. Something strange was happening inside me, something that took me days to identify. It wasn't sadness. It was a kind of cold awakening, like when you realize you've been living in a dream and suddenly open your eyes to a completely different reality. They should have noticed the signs long before. Now, sitting on my new deck a few hundred miles away, I can see with crystal clarity all the moments I ignored, all the strange conversations I let slide, all the glances Ethan and Jessica exchanged when they thought I wasn't watching. The truth is, I had been blind for months, maybe years, believing I was the perfect grandmother and mother-in-law, the one who was always available, the one who never said no. It had all started 6 months before my birthday, in April, when Ethan showed up at my house with a folder full of papers and that smile he used to wear as a child when he wanted to ask for something. "Mom, I have a proposal you're going to love," he said, settling onto the living room sofa while Jessica stood by the window, looking out at the garden with an expression I now understand was poorly disguised impatience. "We found the perfect house for us, but we need your help with the down payment." Ethan continued, extending his hands toward me in that gesture I knew so well. "It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, Mom. A house in the best neighborhood with a yard for Maya, near the good schools." His eyes shone with a genuine excitement I hadn't seen in years, and my mother's heart melted instantly. The house cost $450,000. They had saved $70,000, but they needed me to put in the remaining $150,000 for a proper down payment. "It's only temporary," Jessica insisted, finally approaching the sofa with a smile I now recognize as calculated. "In 6 months, we'll pay you back everything, with interest." Ethan just got that promotion at the firm, and I have several big design projects that are about to be confirmed. I didn't hesitate for a second. That very afternoon, we went to the bank. I took the money from my life savings. The dollars I had scraped together working as a secretary for 40 years, cleaning offices on the weekends, selling homemade pies at the church bake sales. I handed over all that silent sacrifice without a second thought, because I saw the happiness in my son's eyes, because I wanted my granddaughter to grow up in a beautiful home, because I believed that's what mothers did, gave everything for their children's happiness. But there was something else. Ethan asked me to sign some papers to facilitate the legal process. "You know how these things are, Mom," he explained as I signed document after document without reading them completely. "It's just to get everything properly registered, avoid any trouble with the IRS." His voice sounded so confident, so professional, that I trusted him completely. After all, he worked for a real estate company. He knew about these things far more than I did. The first few months after the purchase were lovely. Ethan would call me every week to tell me about the improvements they were making. He sent me pictures of the garden they were planting, of the room they had decorated for Maya. Jessica even invited me to lunch a couple of times, showing me furniture catalogs and asking for my opinion on paint colors. I felt included, important, useful. But after my birthday, something changed radically. The calls became scarce, distant. When I called, they were always busy, always in a hurry, always had something more urgent to attend to. "We'll call you back, Mom," became the most common phrase in our conversations. A promise they rarely kept. It was Maya who, unknowingly, gave me the first real clue about what was happening. My 16-year-old granddaughter showed up at my house one Saturday afternoon, her eyes red from crying and a look of confusion on her face that broke my heart. "Grandma," she said, sitting at the kitchen table where we had done homework together so many times, "why are Mom and Dad talking about selling your house?" "My house, not our house, not the house we bought together." "Your house," Maya had said. The world stopped for a moment, like when you're watching a movie and someone suddenly pauses the frame at the exact moment that changes the entire story. "What did you say, sweetheart?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm while inside I felt something shattering. "Yesterday, I heard Dad on the phone with someone," Maya continued, nervously fiddling with her hands. "He said they already had a buyer for Grandma Eleanor's house, that they were going to close the deal next week." She paused, looking at me with those big, worried eyes she had inherited from her grandfather. "But Grandma, isn't it your house? Why would they sell it without asking you?" In that moment, sitting in my kitchen with my granddaughter, I understood that I had been the biggest fool in the world. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stayed awake until 4 a.m, sitting on my bed with all the papers I had signed 6 months earlier spread across the comforter, trying to understand the words that now took on a completely different meaning. A small table lamp cast strange shadows on the documents, and the more I read, the more my blood ran cold. It wasn't just a home purchase. According to the papers in front of me, I had transferred the full ownership to Ethan and Jessica. My signature was there on every page, authorizing the total transfer of the $150,000, not as a loan, but as a gift. I had signed papers that made them the sole legal owners of the property. I wasn't a co-owner. I had no rights to that house. Officially, I didn't exist in that transaction, except as the person who had handed over the money. I got out of bed like a sleepwalker and went to my computer. My hands trembled as I typed the house's address into a search engine. What I found took my breath away. There it was. House for sale, excellent opportunity. Price, $595,000. The photos showed the house I had paid for, but with upgrades and decorations that had clearly cost a fortune. The garden looked spectacular with new plants and an automatic sprinkler system. The kitchen had been completely remodeled with stainless steel appliances. The floors had been replaced with Italian marble, but what hurt the most was reading the description. Beautiful family home, sold due to owners relocating out of state. Not a single mention that this house had been paid for with the life savings of a 65-year-old woman. Not a word about the sacrifice, about the nights I worked late sewing to save that money, about the weekends I cleaned offices to give them that opportunity. I kept digging like a private detective in a mystery film. I found Jessica's Facebook page, which she had been updating constantly with photos of the house, presenting it as our perfect home and the result of so much hard work and saving. In one particularly elaborate post, she had written, "Thanks to God and our hard work, we finally have the house of our dreams. Anything is possible with dedication." The comments were full of congratulations from friends and family who obviously didn't know the truth. But there was more, so much more. On Instagram, Ethan had been posting photos of a new car, a silver sedan that cost at least $50,000. In his active stories, I could see pictures from expensive restaurants, a weekend getaway to the beach, designer clothes, all paid for with the money they were supposed to pay me back in 6 months. At 5 in the morning, as the sun began to peek through my window, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to confront them, but not as the hurt and confused mother I had been until that moment. I would arrive prepared, with evidence, with specific questions, with the coldness of someone who had finally opened her eyes. I showered, dressed in my best navy blue pantsuit, the one I wore for important occasions, and carefully applied my makeup. I wanted to look strong, dignified, like the woman who had worked her whole life and deserved respect. At 8 o'clock sharp, I was ringing the doorbell of the house that I had paid for, but that legally no longer belonged to me. Jessica opened the door in a bathrobe, a coffee mug in her hand, and a look of surprise that quickly morphed into something resembling guilt. "Eleanor, what a surprise, so early," she said without inviting me in, partially blocking the entrance with her body. "Ethan already left for work. Did you need something specific?" "Yes," I replied with a calm that surprised even me. "I need to talk about the sale of my house." Her face instantly turned pale, and the coffee mug trembled slightly in her hand. "Oh, and I also want you to explain where the money came from for the new car, the beach vacation, and all these kitchen renovations I see you've done." In that moment, I knew that she knew that I knew. And I also knew that the war was just beginning. Jessica finally let me in, but her demeanor had changed completely. She was no longer the smiling daughter-in-law who asked for my advice on decorating. Now she walked ahead of me with quick, nervous steps, leading me to the living room while shouting up to the second floor, "Maya, hurry up or you're going to be late for school." Her voice sounded forced, like she was acting in a poorly rehearsed play. The house was unrecognizable, not just because of the upgrades I had seen in the photos, but because of how they had arranged everything. My eyes scanned every detail. The Italian leather sofa that cost more than my 3-month salary, the giant flat-screen television mounted on the wall, the original paintings I recognized from an expensive downtown gallery, all paid for with my money, while they had told me they barely had enough for basic expenses. "Look, Eleanor," Jessica began, perching on the edge of the expensive sofa. "I know this might seem confusing, but everything is perfectly legal. The papers you signed?" "The papers I signed under false pretenses," I interrupted, keeping my voice steady, though inside my heart was beating like a war drum. "The papers I signed believing it was a temporary loan, not a permanent gift." Her expression changed instantly. The mask of fake concern fell away, revealing something much colder, more calculated. "You can't prove that," she said, crossing her arms. "Your signature is on every document. No one forced you to do anything." Just then, Maya came down the stairs with her school backpack, and the tension in the room was so thick you could cut it with a knife. My granddaughter looked at both of us, obviously sensing something was wrong but not understanding exactly what. "Hi, Grandma," she said, coming over to give me a kiss on the cheek. "Everything's fine, sweetheart." "Everything is perfect," I replied, hugging her and breathing in the scent of strawberry shampoo that always lingered in her hair. "I'm just talking with your mom about some grown-up business." After Maya left for school, the conversation became much more direct. Jessica wasn't pretending anymore. "Look, Eleanor, the situation is simple. The house is legally ours. You decided to help us, and that was very generous of you. But now we need to sell it because we have other plans." "Other plans?" I asked, feeling anger begin to boil in my stomach. "Ethan got a job opportunity in Denver. It's a major promotion, with a much better salary. We're moving there next month." She paused, studying my reaction. "By selling this house, we'll have enough money to buy something better there and start a new life. A new life with my money, without consulting me, without even a proper goodbye," I thought. "And what about me?" I asked. though I already knew the answer. You have your house, you have your pension, you're well established here. We're young. We have to think about our future, about Maya's future. Her voice sounded as if she were explaining something obvious to a foolish child. You can't expect us to stay here forever just because you want to keep the family close. That sentence was like a slap in the face. After everything I had done for them, after handing them my life savings, I was the selfish one for wanting to keep the family together. I was the one who didn't understand that they had more important things to do. But what hurt the most came next. Jessica stood up from the sofa and walked to the window, turning her back to me as if I were no longer important to the conversation. Besides, Eleanor, I think it's time you understood that you're not getting any younger. Living alone at your age can be dangerous. Maybe you should consider moving into a senior living facility where they can take proper care of you. The silence that followed was deafening. Me, who had worked until I was 60, who kept my house immaculate, who cooked for the whole family every Sunday, who tended my garden and paid all my bills on time. Suddenly, I was a helpless old woman who needed to be put in a home. I rose from the sofa with all the dignity I could muster. I understand the situation perfectly, I said, walking toward the door. You have made your decisions, and now I will make mine. When I reached the entrance, I turned around one last time. Oh, and Jessica, one more thing. This conversation has clarified a lot for me, especially about the kind of people you really are. I left that house for the last time without looking back. But in my mind, the first elements of a plan they never saw coming were already forming. That same afternoon, while they thought I was at home crying like a defeated old woman, I was sitting in the office of Arthur Caldwell, the best family law attorney in the city. His office smelled of old books and strong coffee, and the walls were covered with diplomas and certificates that spoke of 40 years of experience defending complicated cases. Mrs. Miller, he said, after carefully reviewing all the documents I had brought, this is a classic case of familial financial abuse. Unfortunately, it's more common than people think. His glasses slid down his nose a bit as he examined each page with the meticulousness of a surgeon. The good news is, we have several legal options. I explained everything. The broken promises, the lies about a temporary loan, the deception with the documents I signed, the expensive upgrades made with money they supposedly didn't have, and especially that morning's conversation, where it became clear everything had been planned from the start. Is there anything I can do? I asked, feeling a small spark of hope for the first time in days. Mr. Caldwell smiled in a way that reminded me of my father when he had an ace up his sleeve during a game of dominoes. Ma'am, not only is there something we can do, there are several things we are going to do. And all of them are completely legal. He opened a new folder and began to write notes quickly. First, we are going to initiate a lawsuit for fraud and undue influence. Second, we are going to request an investigation of all their recently acquired assets. And third, he paused, looking at me directly in the eyes with an expression I couldn't quite interpret. Third, what? I asked. Third, I need you to tell me exactly everything you remember about the purchase of that house. Every detail, every conversation, every promise they made you. Because I have a suspicion there are more irregularities here than what appears in these papers. For the next 2 hours, we reconstructed the entire story from the beginning. Mr. Caldwell took constant notes, asked specific questions, and every so often, he would raise his eyebrows as if he had discovered something important. When I finished telling him everything, he leaned back in his chair and sighed. Mrs. Miller, what you've just told me constitutes not only civil fraud, but possibly criminal fraud. Your son and daughter-in-law could face criminal charges. He paused, studying my reaction. Are you prepared to see this through to the end? For the first time in months, I felt completely sure of something. Mr. Caldwell, for 40 years I worked hard to save that money. I cleaned houses, I sewed clothes, I sold pies, I deprived myself of vacations and luxuries so I could have something to leave for my family. If they decided to steal from me and treat me like a fool, then they are going to meet the woman I truly am. That night, following Mr. Caldwell's precise instructions, I began my own investigation. I created fake social media accounts so I could see all the content Ethan and Jessica had been posting for the last few months. What I discovered kept me awake, not from sadness, but from pure indignation. Not only had they been showing off the lifestyle they were living with my money, but they had also been bad-mouthing me publicly in a private Facebook group called Northwood High School Parents. Jessica had posted several derogatory comments about controlling mothers-in-law and mothers who don't know when to let their adult children go. In one particularly cruel post, she had written, "My mother-in-law thinks that just because she helped us financially, she has the right to an opinion on our decisions. Some parents don't understand that their kids are grown up." But the worst came when I found a video Ethan had uploaded to his Instagram 2 weeks after my birthday. It was a video of him and Jessica toasting with expensive champagne in an elegant restaurant. The caption read, "When you finally break free from toxic family expectations and can live your own life. Number freedom, number new beginnings, number no more drama." That video had been filmed with my money at a dinner that cost more than my monthly grocery bill, celebrating their freedom from me after they had stolen my life savings. That night, alone in my house, I didn't cry. Instead, I opened a bottle of wine I had been saving for a special occasion. I poured myself a glass and toasted myself. To the woman who is about to show them what having more important things to do really means, I said aloud, and drank the wine, savoring every drop as if it were the first taste of my new life. The next day, Mr. Caldwell called me early. "Mrs. Miller, I have news. Very good news. It turns out your son and daughter-in-law made a very serious mistake. When they registered the property transfer, they did it before the minimum legal waiting period for family-related transfers was complete," Mr. Caldwell explained, his voice sounding like music to my ears. "Technically, the title transfer is voidable until a full 6 months have passed from the original filing." My heart began to beat faster. What does that mean, exactly? It means that you, as the original grantor, have the legal right to revoke the transfer and reclaim the property within the next 48 hours. After that, the current buyer will have acquired rights. His voice grew more serious. "Mrs. Miller, if we are going to act, it has to be right now." I didn't think for a second. Do it. Do whatever is necessary. The next few hours were a whirlwind of paperwork, signatures, and phone calls. Mr. Caldwell pulled strings at the county recorder's office, the courthouse, and even with the notary who had authorized the original transfer. By 6 o'clock that evening, the house was legally back in my name. But the real masterstroke came next. "Now, Mr. Caldwell said, with a smile that would have made any opposing counsel tremble, "we are going to sell this property immediately, before they find out what happened. I have a client who has been looking for exactly this type of house and is willing to pay $610,000 in cash, closing tomorrow morning." I didn't sleep that night, not from anxiety, but from pure adrenaline. I was experiencing something I hadn't felt in years, the power of taking control of my own life. While they slept peacefully in the house they thought they had already sold, I was awake, organizing my perfect revenge. At 8 o'clock the next morning, I was back in Mr. Caldwell's office signing the sale documents. The buyer was a young executive who needed to relocate urgently for work and paid the full price without haggling. By 10 o'clock in the morning, $610,000 were deposited into my bank account. "What's next?" I asked the lawyer, feeling a mix of triumph and nervousness. "Now, we wait," he replied, carefully filing all the documents in a folder marked with my name. The law requires that they be officially notified of the change in ownership. That notice will arrive at their house this afternoon. I decided to have lunch at an elegant restaurant downtown, one of those places I had never dared to enter because they seemed too expensive. I ordered the priciest dish on the menu, a bottle of white wine and dessert. For the first time in years, I felt like an important woman, like someone who deserved to be treated with respect and consideration. As I savored my meal, my phone began to vibrate. First, a text from Ethan. "Mom, we need to talk. Urgently. Come to the house right now." Then another. "Mom, answer the phone." And another. "This is serious. Something is wrong with the house." I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I ordered a coffee and a slice of chocolate cake and sat there enjoying my lunch while my phone continued to ring incessantly. By 3 in the afternoon, I had 23 missed calls and 18 text messages, each more desperate than the last. "Mom, please, we have to talk. We don't understand what's happening. The closing agent says we're not the owners anymore. Mom, answer, please. Finally, I decided to answer. Not because I felt sorry for them, but because I wanted to hear their voices when they realized that the foolish, helpless mother they thought they could manipulate no longer existed. Hello, Ethan, I said, my voice so calm it surprised me. Mom, thank God you answered. Where are you? We need you to come here right now. There's a huge problem with the house. There's no problem at all, I replied, taking a sip of my coffee. The house was sold this morning, just as planned. The silence on the other end of the line was so long I thought we had been disconnected. What did you say? He finally asked, in a voice I barely recognized. I said the house was sold for $610,000. A good price, don't you think? But Mom, that's our house. We had already sold it. We have a signed contract. You had a signed contract, I corrected him. But it turns out that contract was illegal. And since the house legally became mine again, I decided to sell it to whomever I pleased. What followed were 10 minutes of shouting, pleading, threats, and finally, the most pathetic crying I had ever heard in my life. Ethan, my 35-year-old son, sobbing like a 5-year-old because his perfect plan had crumbled. When I hung up the phone, I sat there in that elegant restaurant, surrounded by the murmur of other conversations and the soft clinking of silverware against plates. And for the first time in months, I truly smiled. At 5 in the afternoon, I was back at my house, packing a suitcase with the essentials. Mr. Caldwell had been very clear. Mrs. Miller, after what we did today, they are going to try everything to pressure you. I recommend you leave town for a few days until things cool down. He didn't need to tell me twice. I had already booked a room in a small, quiet hotel 3 hours away in a mountain town where no one knew me. As I was carefully folding my clothes, I heard the sound of a car braking sharply in front of my house. Through the window, I saw Ethan's silver sedan, the one they had bought with my money. The doors flew open violently, and out came Ethan and Jessica, followed by Maya, who had clearly been crying. Their footsteps sounded like hammer blows on the concrete walkway as they approached my door. The banging started before they could even ring the bell. Mom, open this door right now, Ethan yelled, his voice one I hadn't heard since he was a rebellious teenager. We know you're in there. We need to talk. I didn't move from my bedroom. I continued packing with slow, deliberate movements, folding each garment as if it were the most important thing in the world. Every pound on the door, every shout, every desperate plea only confirmed that I had made the right decision. Eleanor, please. Now it was Jessica's voice, but it no longer sounded like the polite, manipulative daughter-in-law. It sounded like a woman on the verge of hysteria. You can't do this. We have rights. We have a contract with our buyer. Maya had remained quiet, but I could hear her silent sobs through the door. That hurt more than all the shouting combined, but not enough to make me change my mind. If my granddaughter was suffering, it was her parents' fault, not mine. For half an hour, they continued to knock, shout, and plead. Ethan got to the point of screaming, Mom, if you don't open up, we're going to have to call the police. This is theft. This is illegal. That's when I decided to answer them. I walked to the door without opening it and spoke loudly enough for them to hear me clearly. Ethan, if you want to call the police, go right ahead. I have all the legal documents proving the house was mine and that the sale you made was illegal. I also have proof of all the money you spent, which you claimed you didn't have. The silence that followed was absolute. Even Maya stopped crying for a moment. Furthermore, I continued, if you call the police, I'll also have to show them the screenshots of all the posts where you bragged about the lifestyle you were living with money you stole from me, including that lovely video where you celebrate being free of me. I heard Jessica whisper something that sounded like, I didn't know she saw that, and Ethan respond with a word I won't repeat. Grandma, Maya said in a small, broken voice, I didn't know about any of this. Please, don't be mad at me. My heart broke in two. I opened the door just a crack and saw my granddaughter with red, swollen eyes, standing between her parents like a hostage in a war she hadn't started. Sweetheart, I said, I could never be mad at you. This is between the adults. You're not to blame for any of this. That's when Ethan completely lost control. Stop manipulating my daughter. You're the one destroying this family. All we did was for our future. Your future? I asked, opening the door completely and looking him in the eyes for the first time in days. Your future built on lies, theft, and disrespect for the woman who gave you life? Is that the future you want? Jessica stepped forward with an expression that tried to be threatening but only managed to look desperate. Eleanor, you don't understand the consequences of what you did. We had already committed that money. We have debts to pay. We have the job in Denver waiting for us. That's not my problem, I replied with a coldness that surprised even me. You made your plans without consulting me. You spent money that wasn't yours, and you lied to me for months. Now, you face the consequences. Ethan looked at me with an expression that mixed fury, disbelief, and something it took me a moment to recognize: fear. Mom, are you really going to destroy your own family over money? I didn't destroy anything, I responded. You destroyed the trust. You destroyed the respect. You destroyed the love I had for this family when you decided to treat me like a fool. I am just picking up the pieces of my dignity. I left them standing in my yard and closed the door. I finished packing, called a cab, and left my house without looking back. In the taxi, watching my neighborhood, my house, my previous life fade away through the window, I felt like a butterfly that had just emerged from its chrysalis. The hotel in the mountains was exactly what I needed. Small, quiet, with a spectacular view of the valley and a staff that asked no questions. My room had a balcony with 2 wicker chairs and a small table where I could have my morning coffee while looking out at a landscape that seemed taken from a postcard. For the first time in months, I was in no hurry to do anything. I didn't have to cook for anyone but myself. I didn't have to worry about the needs of others. For the first 2 days, my phone never stopped ringing. 51 missed calls the first day, 37 the second. The messages had become increasingly dramatic and desperate. Ethan had gone from fury to pleading and finally to veiled threats. Jessica alternated between fake apologies and direct attacks on my character. But there were other messages too from numbers I didn't recognize. On the 3rd day, I decided to read some of those unknown messages. One of them made my blood run cold. Mrs. Miller, this is Attorney Fernandez, legal representative for the Herrera family. My client is very interested in reaching an out-of-court settlement regarding the property issue. Please contact me urgently. Another one said, Mrs. Miller, we are a media company. We would like to interview you about the family conflict that has gone viral on social media. We can offer financial compensation for your testimony. Viral on social media. My heart began to pound. I opened Facebook and Instagram on my phone and searched for Jessica's name. What I found took my breath away. She had posted a 40-minute video on her Facebook page titled, When a Mother Destroys Her Own Family Over Money. In the video, Jessica appeared crying dramatically, with Maya beside her, also crying, telling a completely distorted version of the events. According to her story, I was a greedy old woman who had manipulated legal documents to steal their house after they had generously included me in the purchase. My mother-in-law forced us to put the house in her name because she said we'd get better credit terms that way, Jessica said between theatrical sobs. We trusted her because she's family. We paid for everything with our savings. We worked day and night on the renovations. And now she says the house was hers and sold it without telling us. The video had over 50,000 views and hundreds of comments, most of them supporting Jessica and condemning me as a toxic mother-in-law and an abusive old woman. They had managed to paint me as the villain of the story, as a cruel woman who had destroyed a young family out of pure malice. But what hurt the most was seeing Maya in the video, my granddaughter, her eyes swollen from crying, saying between whimpers, "My grandma was always good to me. I don't understand why she's doing this. We just want our house back so we can move to Denver like we planned." The video had been shared thousands of times and had already reached local radio shows and gossip blogs. In the comments, people speculated about my mental state, suggesting I must be senile or manipulated by third parties, and some even proposed starting a collection to help this family victimized by elder abuse. I got out of the hotel bed and walked to the balcony. The cool mountain air helped calm me and think clearly. I immediately called Mr. Caldwell. Mrs. Miller, several media outlets have already contacted me about the case, he said before I could even explain what I had seen. I recommend you make no public statement for now. They are playing the victim card, but we have something better: the documented truth. What do you mean? I asked, suddenly feeling very tired. I mean, I have all the proof of what really happened. The original documents where it's clearly established that you were the sole owner. The screenshots of all their posts bragging about their spending. The exact dates that prove they lied about their income. And something else I discovered yesterday. What else? Your son and daughter-in-law applied for a $75,000 bank loan using the house as collateral 3 days before they sold it to the first buyer. Technically, they were committing bank fraud in addition to defrauding you. That information changed everything. This was no longer just a family dispute. It was a fraud case that could have serious criminal consequences. Mr. Caldwell, I said, feeling a strange calm wash over me. I think it's time for the truth to come out. Are you sure? Once we initiate the full legal process, there's no going back. I looked out at the valley from my balcony, where the afternoon sun was painting the mountains in shades of gold, and I thought about all the years I had worked in silence, sacrificed in silence, loved in silence. The time had come for my voice to be heard. I'm sure, I replied. Do whatever is necessary. 3 months later, I was sitting on the terrace of my new house, in a small coastal town, 4 hours away from my old life, watching the sunrise over the ocean while I had my morning coffee. The house was small, but perfect. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen with a window overlooking the sea, and a garden where I had planted roses, lavender, and herbs. I had bought it with the money from the sale, and I still had enough left over to live comfortably for many years. The legal process had ended the previous week. Ethan and Jessica faced charges for bank fraud and were sentenced to pay a substantial fine and perform community service. The job in Denver vanished when the company learned of the legal scandal. Jessica's viral video was taken down after Mr. Pange's 25 who'd end. Caldwell presented the real evidence, and several of the media outlets that had run the story had to issue retractions. But my victory wasn't shouted from the rooftops or celebrated with fanfare. It was lived in silence, as true victories should be. Maya had sent me a letter 2 weeks ago, a 6-page handwritten letter, asking for my forgiveness for participating in the video without knowing the whole truth. Grandma, she wrote in her careful teenage script, I understand now that my parents lied to me about a lot of things. I didn't know you had paid for the house completely. I didn't know they had tricked you with the documents. I didn't know they had been spending your money on unnecessary things. I feel terrible for appearing in that video saying things that weren't true. The letter went on to explain that she had decided to go live with her Aunt Norma, Jessica's sister, because she couldn't stand the toxic atmosphere at home anymore. My parents won't stop fighting, blaming each other, and blaming you for everything that's happening to them. But I know they got themselves into this mess. At the end of the letter, Maya wrote, I know you probably don't want anything to do with this family anymore, and I would completely understand. But if you ever forgive me and want to see me, I'll be waiting. I love you, Grandma, and I'm so sorry for everything we put you through. That letter had made me cry for the first time in months, but not from sadness, from relief. My granddaughter, the only innocent person in this whole story, had managed to see the truth for herself. I had replied immediately, inviting her to visit me at my new house during her summer vacation. I wanted to show her my garden, cook with her in my new kitchen, walk along the beach together at sunset. I wanted to show her that true love survives lies and manipulation. Ethan never apologized. In the last messages he sent before I changed my phone number, he continued to blame me for destroying the family and for being a selfish mother. Jessica had tried to contact me through social media with messages that alternated between dramatic apologies and veiled threats. I had blocked all her profiles. I didn't feel hatred toward them. That had been the most surprising part of this whole process, discovering that after all the pain and betrayal, what I felt for my son and daughter-in-law wasn't hatred, but a kind of quiet indifference. They had shown themselves to be people I couldn't trust, people who were willing to hurt someone who loved them for money and convenience. And when you know someone's true nature, you can no longer love them in the same way. I finished my coffee and got up to water the plants in my garden. The roses had started to bloom, and the scent of lavender mixed with the salty sea breeze. As I watered each plant carefully, I thought about the woman I had been 6 months ago, invisible, accommodating, always ready to sacrifice for a family that took her for granted. That woman no longer existed. In her place was a woman who knew her own worth, who had reclaimed her dignity, who had learned that self-love is more important than the approval of others. A woman who had discovered that sometimes, to save what really matters, you have to have the courage to leave everything behind. That afternoon, as I was preparing dinner in my kitchen with a view of the sea, the doorbell rang. It was the mail carrier with a small package for me. There was no return address, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was from Maya. Inside was a framed photo of the two of us, taken on my birthday the previous year, when everything seemed normal and happy. On the back, in her neat handwriting, she had written, "For the bravest grandma in the world. Thanks for teaching me that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's survival." I placed the photo on the kitchen windowsill where I could see it while I cooked. Then I turned on the radio, put on some soft music, and continued preparing my dinner. Alone, but not empty. At peace after the storm. That night, before going to sleep, I opened my bedroom windows to listen to the sound of the waves against the shore. For the first time in years, I fell asleep without worries, without anxiety, without fear. I had won something more valuable than money or property. I had gotten my life back. 2 years later, the sound of the doorbell at my seaside home no longer startled me. I had learned to enjoy unexpected visits, the fisherman who came by every Tuesday, Mrs. Gable from 2 houses down who had become my tea-time companion, or the neighborhood kids who came to ask for oranges from my tree. But that Saturday morning when I opened the door, I found a surprise that took my breath away. Maya was standing on my doorstep, but she was no longer the confused, hurt teenager who had visited during vacations. She was a young woman of 18 with a radiant smile and a suitcase in her hand. "Hi, Grandma," she said, and her voice sounded different, more mature, more confident. "I've come to ask you a very big favor." I let her in and made coffee, while she settled on the living room sofa, the same place where we had spent so many hours during her previous visits, talking about life, about her parents' mistakes, about her dreams of studying veterinary medicine and working with marine animals. "I got a full scholarship to study marine biology at the state university," she told me, her eyes shining with excitement. "It's everything I ever wanted, Grandma. But the campus is only an hour from here, and I was wondering if I could maybe stay with you while I study. I promise I won't be a bother. I can help with expenses, work on weekends. I can cook, clean." I didn't let her finish. I stood up from my chair and hugged her with a strength that surprised me. "Sweetheart," I said, feeling tears welling up in my eyes. "This house feels empty without you. Of course, you can stay." That afternoon, as I helped Maya unpack her things in the guest room that had been waiting for her for 2 years, she told me about her life with her Aunt Norma. She told me how she had graduated from high school with excellent grades, how she had worked part-time at a vet clinic to save money, and something that broke my heart. She hadn't spoken to her parents in over a year. "After everything happened, they tried to manipulate me into helping them get money from you," she explained while hanging her clothes in the closet. "They asked me to write you letters, asking you to give them a second chance, to loan them money for some new business." She sat down on the bed and looked at me with a sadness I hadn't seen in her eyes in a long time. "When I refused, they started treating me like I was the enemy. Grandma, do you think I'm a bad person for not wanting a relationship with my own parents?" I sat down next to her and took her hands in mine. "My dear," I said, "sometimes the families we choose are more important than the families we are born into. You chose honesty over blind loyalty. You chose your future over their manipulation. That doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you a strong one." That night, I made a special dinner to celebrate Maya living with me. As we cooked together in my little kitchen, I realized something beautiful. During the 2 years I had lived alone, I had learned to be happy by myself. But having Maya back didn't make me feel dependent or needy. It made me feel complete in a different way, like when you share something good that you already possess, not when you're looking for something you lack. During dinner, Maya told me about her academic plans, her dreams of working in marine conservation, her hopes of making a difference in the world. I listened to her with the same admiration I had felt when she was a little girl telling me about the books she was reading, but now her passion had direction and purpose. "Grandma," she said as we washed the dishes together, "there's something I never told you, but I think about it every day." "What is it, sweetheart?" "Thank you for teaching me that it's okay to say no, that it's okay to set boundaries, that it's okay to walk away from people who hurt you, even if they're family. She paused, carefully drying a plate before continuing. If I hadn't seen how you defended yourself, I don't think I ever would have had the courage to get away from my parents when they started being toxic with me too. That night, after Maya had gone to bed, I went out to the terrace with a cup of chamomile tea and sat watching the ocean under the full moon. The sound of the waves was my favorite music now, a constant symphony reminding me that life, like the sea, is always in motion, always changing, always offering new possibilities. I thought about the woman I had been 4 years ago, sitting at an empty birthday table, waiting for a family that never came. That woman had been broken by betrayal, but from that fracture, someone entirely new had been born. A woman who knew that true love does not require the sacrifice of one's own dignity, that healthy relationships are built on mutual respect, not on familial obligation. My phone vibrated with a text. It was from Mrs. Gable, my neighbor, who had seen Maya arrive that morning. "So happy to see your granddaughter back. I'll bring over a cake tomorrow to celebrate. It's beautiful to see a family that truly loves each other. A family that truly loves each other." Those words resonated in my mind as I finished my tea. For years, I had believed that loving your family meant putting up with anything, forgiving any abuse, sacrificing anything to maintain unity. Now, I knew that true love requires boundaries, respect, and the courage to walk away when necessary. Maya and I were a small family, but a real one. A family built on mutual choice, on genuine affection, on the shared desire to grow and be better people. We didn't need anyone else to be complete. Before going inside, I took one last look at the ocean. Tomorrow, a new chapter would begin, being the grandmother who supports her granddaughter's dreams, the woman who found peace after the storm, the person who learned that sometimes, to save what really matters, you have to have the courage to leave it all behind. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the future.